All right, everyone, welcome and thank you for joining us for our Q&A session on JobKeeper. We've been inundated with questions, as I'm sure you would expect. We thought it would be a great format to answer some of those questions and provide some sort of overview for the full JobKeeper information. So it's with pleasure that I introduce our Director of Taxation, Lynette Spries. So Lynette heads up our SA&NT Tax Division, Specialised Tax Division. So I'll hand over for her to make a start.
Okay. So I'll just do a, so welcome to our webinar. This is my 7th webinar today. So we've done a few of them, which has been really good to just reach out to all of our clients. We are recording this webinar, so we will actually send round the recording. Maybe there's some people that can't actually make it as well, so we will make sure that they get included as well. It's been really fascinating to actually see the types of questions we're getting around JobKeeper. Nathan would agree with me on this, that we're getting all sorts of questions, but be assured that all of the questions that you guys have are the same all the way around Australia. Everybody's having similar issues. The package itself for JobKeeper is really designed for you guys as business owners to survive through what we're going through at the moment, and making sure that you come out the other side with your key employees. So we're going to do a Q&A after I've done a bit of a presentation. We'll also deal with the webinar questions that you submitted. But always, if you have any other questions, please contact Nathan and his team in Darwin. And if he needs, he'll reach out to me to get any more information that he needs. So I'm muting and sending you off, Nathan, I'm sorry. So, okay, so this is just a little presentation that I've actually done for the JobKeeper. A lot of this you may know, but I'm hoping to give you a few little bits and pieces. So we'll just head through this. So obviously, we've got 3 key criteria. We need to be an eligible employer. We need to have eligible employee or employees, and we need to meet a wage condition. So we're going to talk about each of these in a bit more detail. So an eligible employer carries on a business in Australia. And it's tested, that test is on the 1st of March. So the ATO provides us with lots of criteria about what carrying on a business actually means. It's not going to include something like if I've received rental income or I've received a trust distribution. It's not what carrying on a business is. We also need to meet, as an eligible employer, a decline in turnover test. So for many people would be aware, for a turnover less than $1 billion, we've got to have a 30% reduction in turnover. We're going to talk a bit more about that in a minute. If your turnover is greater than $1 billion, of course, you will actually have to have a 50% reduction, and charities are a little bit more special than that, and they actually only have to have a 15% reduction. So, and you can't be an excluded entity. So you can't actually be a major bank, you can't be a government body or agency, and you can't be a company in liquidation or a partnership, trust and a sole trader in bankruptcy. It will mean that you're not an eligible employer. So once you've ticked all of that, then we've got to start to look at who are our eligible employees. So once again, our test date, 1st of March, which is the same as what it is for the employers. We'll need to look at our employees. Are they full-time and part-time? Not a problem. If they were full-time or part-time on the 1st of March, we can actually let them go into JobKeeper. If they're long-term casuals, now there's been a lot of discussion about long-term casuals. The greater than 12 months, regular and recurring work for that period. So somebody that is a real big part of your business, if you like. There's age and residency requirements. So age is basically anyone over 16 and above, and residency refers to, Australian citizens and residents, people here on permanent visas, people with, there's a special visa class 444 from New Zealand. I'm actually going to do another, we're actually going to have some frequently asked questions that we'll send around to people after these webinars, and I'm going to provide a bit more detail exactly which visas are included, because I've seemed to have got a lot of questions about that in the last couple of days. So not only do you have to be an eligible employee on the 1st of March, for each JobKeeper payment, those eligible employees have to remain employed in the business. They have to be nominated as they have to nominate themselves as an eligible employee, and they can't be excluded. So the excluded ones are people on paid parental leave. So, and that includes dad pay as well. People on workers' compensation who are not working in your business, and also people that are on what was the other one? Permanently incapacitated. So hopefully we don't have many of those. But one interesting issue we did come across, because there's a fair bit of play between the tax legislation and the Fair Work Act, which was amended. So if you're on maternity leave, let's say I had paid parental leave for my 18 weeks or whatever it is, and then I go on to unpaid maternity leave because I'm not going back to work yet, those people are actually eligible for JobKeeper. So that's an interesting scenario. So as employers, we've worked out we're eligible. So we actually have to let our eligible employees know that we are eligible for JobKeeper because we've met the turnover test and all the other tests. And then that employer will go off and nominate themselves as an eligible employee. Employees don't have to nominate to be with you for JobKeeper, and in some instances they actually probably can't, and that's to do with how their employment is. The wage condition. So put simply, minimum gross wage of $1,500 per JobKeeper fortnight. So it just means within a JobKeeper fortnight, and the government have gone through and split this 6 months into 6 months of 2-week periods. So starting on the 30th of March, for each of those fortnights, if you're eligible for JobKeeper, you need to make sure that every employee gets $1,500 minimum gross pay for every one of those fortnights. If I'm not eligible yet, then I'll wait till I am an eligible employer and I've had my reduction in turnover, and then from then on I need to make sure that that I'm paying that minimum payment. So real life example, let's say I'm paid $1,000 a fortnight, but my business is eligible and I'm eligible. I'll get my $1,000 if I'm still working for the work that I do, maybe, but then my business will have to top that up by $500. Just a quick note, the $500 top up is not subject to super. There's going to be legislation to change that, but they haven't actually done that at this stage. So the 1,500 is important. Let's say I'm still going okay in April, but in May, I'm projecting that I'm not going to do very well at all. And bearing in mind, you need to enroll for the JobKeeper in advance going forward from this April date. So in May, I look at my turnover and I think, wow, for this month, we haven't got that many jobs to do. We haven't got that many orders. I think our turnover is really going to drop. So you have to do the calculations to start with, and we'll talk a bit more about that in a minute. But you'll have to start paying the $1,500 per JobKeeper fortnight from the beginning of May so that you comply with that wage condition. Obviously with April, it's a little bit special in that because we're doing legislation on the run, so to speak, we have to make sure that we pay 2 JobKeeper fortnights by the 30th of April to be eligible. Now, just a quick note, also, it's subject to tax. It's going to be assessable income of your employee. So I think if there's no other conditions, $1,500 per fortnight gets $192 of tax taken out of it. Okay. So let's say I have a business, I'm a trust. I have employees. So yes, I can go off and register for all of my employees for JobKeeper, but myself, I'm not actually employed in the trust. But it's my business. So this is how we can actually get money, and it's a good thing to do. The government decided that not everybody would necessarily be employed. There'd be a lot of people that get their money from dividends or trust distributions or drawings out of a partnership or something like that. So this was designed to partway fix this. It hasn't gone the whole way, but partway fix this. So as at the 1st of March, there's 2 test dates. 1st of March, I have to meet the age and residency requirements, which is your 16 years, as we discussed before. you have to be actively engaged in the business. So in my trust, if I'm actively engaged in running my business, I will be eligible to be this eligible business participant. So in a partnership, you might find that one partner actually does all the work and the other one maybe just doesn't do anything in the business. So you'd probably pick the person doing all the work in the business itself. So sole trader, it's going to be that person is the nominated individual. If one partner in a partnership, one adult beneficiary of a trust, and one director or shareholder of a company. So what happens is the JobKeeper payment becomes assessable income of that entity, and then it's distributed out from there. So it doesn't mean that that partner in the partnership is assessed on the JobKeeper. They actually, it is income of the whole entity that gets distributed out like normal. The one difference between this scenario with JobKeeper and employees is you don't have to physically pay $1,500 a fortnight to that nominated person. But then on the 12th of March, the other eligible part of this, or the other requirement, is the business itself must have an ABN and it must meet lodgement requirements. Now, this can be a bit tricky. Lodgement requirements requires the 2019 tax return to be lodged, which shows supplies, so income, or you have to have lodged business activity statements from the 1st of July 18 before the 12th of March 2020 that show supplies of goods. So basically your G1 on your business activity statement. So you have to meet both of those. This can be a little bit problematic. What if I've got a business that started since the end of the 19 financial year? I probably have an ABN, but I might not have met any lodgement requirements. So I think that there should be some more information on this one coming out, I would imagine. So our next steps. So this is what we've been dealing with. I think Nathan actually started this on Sunday. I think I started to do some on Sunday as well. Enrolling our businesses. So you can do it through us as your tax agent, or you can do it through the business portal. As part of this webinar, afterwards we'll send you a whole heap of information, frequently asked questions, and there will be actually some more information on how to get onto the business portal if you haven't already done it through MyGovID. We're recognising that not everyone has had the opportunity to do that because AusKey only disappeared on the 31st of March. It feels a lifetime away, to be honest. Anyway, so then the next thing we need to do is we need to get all our eligible employees to fill out that employment notification notice. I'd ask that doesn't have to go to the ATO. So if you keep those records with your employment, your payroll records, but perhaps also send Nathan and his team copies of them so that they can keep them in their records. So we've got just a backup of what you've got, making sure that we're doing all the right things. Same thing with the business participation notice for your nominated individual. I don't believe that has to be lodged with the ATO as well. Although as it's a bit of a moving target, I haven't verified that. And then the check that we've paid our 1,500 gross wages. So bearing in mind also that's only for employees only. So when we sent out your webinar invite, we actually had about 6 questions that we really wanted to cover off with you that were quite topical at the time. So the reduction in turnover test. So at this stage, there is only one test, which is a basic test, and you compare a month or a quarter with the previous year. So for example, you can pick March, April, May, right through to September as months, or you can pick the quarters. So you could pick the June quarter or the September quarter. You can't pick the March quarter because that was before all of this happened. So very good example, I might have had a really good month in March, but then when coronavirus came through, my income has dropped substantially. Maybe I'm a restaurant or something like that. So I've definitely dropped all of my income. So I will actually compare the turnover in April 2020 to the turnover in April 2019. So that's the basic test. Then we're looking at, there should be some more alternate tests to come. We're expecting them in the next week. So what about if I wasn't in business 12 months ago? what sort of test can I meet to get JobKeeper, we're thinking it's probably along the line of average turnover for a month. Maybe that's decreased. But what about if I'm a farmer and 12 months ago and even 2 years ago, we were in the middle of the drought and my turnover was atrocious because we couldn't sell anything because of the drought. Might have to go back more years. So once again, that might be something, or it should be something that's covered under the alternate tests. We'll keep you up to date with all of those tests as they come out. And documentation, this is a self-assessed reduction in turnover. So, but it can be subject to review by the ATO. So we don't want to get it wrong. So what I'm suggesting to our clients is that we prepare a spreadsheet that basically shows us how we've actually come to this 30% reduction. Maybe I've got a printout from Mobile Zero or my accounting software that tells me what my turnover is for the month and what it was for the 12 months before. Compare them, I've dropped by more than 30%. Now, where this comes into a bit of a problem is, how about if I'm still doing pretty good, but I expect May to be really bad? Going forward, you actually have to project forward. So how are you going to be able to document that to say, I believe I'm dropping by 30%? So you're going to have to show some of your assumptions and your calculations to support the fact that you're probably going to drop by 30%. We believe there will be some tolerance. So if you say, I'm going to drop by more than 30%, and then when it comes to when you actually finish that month, you haven't, there should be some tolerance to actually accept that, and the commissioner will have some discretion with it. We haven't got any fixed guidelines on that yet. Okay, so what do I have to do to receive the payment? So first thing is to enrol. Now, please be aware there are some issues that the ATO are already aware of with the enrolment process. So they're still working through those. So I'm actually hoping that they'll be fixed in the next week or so. I believe the enrolment process has actually been extended, and I've got the 26th of April there, but I believe it's been extended to about the 4th or the 5th of May. So, and any other time. So if I'm eligible in June, I need to make sure that I've done that projection, done my calculations, worked out, I think it's going to go down or it is going to go down by 30% on my calculations. So if I work that out early in May, I need to make sure in that first JobKeeper fortnight in May that I make sure I pay the $1,500 minimum payment to all my employees. The employee nomination form needs to be completed and kept, as we talked about before, and there will be some continuing monthly reporting so that you're eligible still for your JobKeeper payments. We'll talk about that in a couple of slides. So how do I pay my staff? So we've already talked a fair bit about this. Minimum gross pay of $1,500. Gross pay includes just about everything that we would normally pay an employee. So it would include leave pay, it would include leave loading, overtime, allowances, all that sort of stuff. So really, when you're doing a payroll, it's going to be your gross pay on the top of your pay slip. We want people to pay through normal payroll processes. The ATO will be checking STP records to make sure that we're complying with this $1,500 minimum payment. But April is a catch-up month, so we just need to, if we're eligible from the 30th of March, we just need to make sure that we've got 2 JobKeeper payments or $3,000 for every eligible employee paid by the 30th of April. Okay. Reporting requirements. So enrol when we meet our criteria. For some people, it will be now. For some people, it might not be for a little while. Just keep a really close tab on your turnover to see where it's heading. We need to confirm that we're eligible, and we have a list. We know who our eligible employees are because we have to provide that list to the ATO. Monthly reports are due by the 7th of each month of the next month. So if I've enrolled for April, I have to provide it by the 7th of May. There may be an extension for the first one because I don't even know if they've actually produced the reports. Reporting my actual turnover for the previous month plus my projected turnover for the month that I'm heading into. Yeah, so the ATO state that they're actually not using, let's say I registered in April, they're not using the actual turnover to compare it to what I predicted it to be if you've entered into JobKeeper. But, you know, I'm a bit sceptical and we just want to be careful that we dot our I's, cross our T's to make sure we're eligible. So I'm not necessarily going to go through this slide. This is all about that business participant payment, which is where I'm not an employee, but I can get a JobKeeper payment anyway. I think I touched on the fact that if you have a JobKeeper payment in these instances, it's assessable income of the business. And the nomination is only to make sure that JobKeeper payment is only paid once to each person. So I can't be a participant in like a non-employee to get JobKeeper and be an employee somewhere else and get a JobKeeper payment as well. Each person is only entitled to one. And lastly, the question we had was, what can happen if I get it wrong? Overpayments. So for example, what about if I've said that somebody is an eligible employee and it turns out they weren't, maybe they hadn't been employed for 12 months, so they were short-term casual. So maybe that's an issue. You have to repay the JobKeeper that you've been given, plus you'll have to pay back general interest charge, and as we know, that's actually a little bit more than what banks charge, because that's what the ATO does, and it's from the date of the overpayment. So there are real repercussions if we actually don't get it quite right, and so we want to be very careful, and that's where we are here to help you to make sure that everything is okay with your business. Okay, so now I'm actually going to open up our question and answers. And we already have one there, so that's excellent. But Nathan, if we want to, you know, the format of this is Nathan will be asking us some questions because you guys in the NT have got lots of great questions. And we're going to go through some of your questions, and feel free to put another question up there if you like, and we'll go through as many as we can. Okay.
So some of the questions that were sent previously. So firstly, just on eligibility, and it's probably just to recap on that. Does this apply for all structures such as trusts, sole traders, companies, not-for-profits, Indigenous entities?
Yeah, absolutely. So you just have to look at, is it an eligible employer? So it can be any type of entity, and then it has to meet that turnover test. It has to have obviously either employees or have an active person in it. Yeah, so it's mostly to do with, you know, the turnover test. So, but any type of entity.
Okay, perfect. Is there a deadline that you have to apply for the JobKeeper payment, or can you apply at a later date when the impact is felt?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're not impacted in March and April, you might think in May, I'm actually going to get it. That's when you'll have to enroll. Now, everything's going to meld into one, unfortunately, though, because people registering in May will be sort of going together with the April people as well. But let's say it's not till July when you start to feel the impacts. You know, like the real estate industry seems to, some of those might take a while to actually to enter this sort of territory. You can register at a later time.
Okay, perfect. If we purchased a new business within the last 12 months, or if we've restructured from a sole trader to a company or to a trust, how does that work in terms of the eligibility?
Yeah, so you still got to meet the tests to be an eligible employer and have eligible employees. So as at the 1st of March, check those tests out. Make sure that you've got an eligible employer and eligible employees. The one that will impact probably the most if you've purchased a business in the last 12 months is long-term casuals. So if those long-term casuals were employed by the previous owner, you do have a possibility to actually use that service with the previous owner to count towards the 12 months.
Okay. Moving on to turnover scenarios now. So how much tolerance do you think the ATO would give us? Is 28%, is that going to be close enough, or what?
Yeah, so look, I think the ATO on the website are basically saying they do have some tolerance, but of course there's really no, I think the example they gave on there was quite minimal. So if you estimate it's 30%, but you say, 28, 27 or something, they will accept that you've actually tried to the best of your abilities to actually predict it, that it's going to be down. I think in particular for this first month, if we can actually wait closer to the end of April and have more definitive numbers to register, I think that would be better. But having said that, we just need to make sure that we've got those $1,500 two payments. So
excellent. All right. Also in turnover. So we know the ATO loves to check up on us. Do you think like they will check up and compare June 19 to the June 20 BAS, even if we picked April as our month?
Look, I think they will look at it, but realistically, you can either use your month or your quarter. So if April by itself suffers that 30% reduction in turnover, you might find that May and June actually increase. So they're not going to be able to check it through that scenario very easily. I think as long as we've got records that support it, that April drop, I think we'll be okay. Well, we will be okay because it's as required under the test.
Perfect. We are a new company as of July 19. We've also haven't had a 30% reduction in the business. Can we compare April 19 to April 20?
So first of all, you're going to have to, you will have to wait until you get that 30% reduction either in April or projected forward. So, but then the extra thing is being a new company, we don't have anything to compare our turnover to. So they should be, for new entities in the last 12 months, I think that will be one of the first alternate tests that comes out because we have a lot of those in our client base, people that have started up businesses.
Okay, if we're moving on to employment now, are we allowed to pay our staff on annual leave and use the JobKeeper payments for it?
Yeah, look, from a tax point of view, the answer is yes, but there are some Fair Work Act amendments. They're generally, and neither Nathan or I are HR lawyers, so, but generally, as long as you keep your employees with 2 weeks of annual leave, you can actually ask them, and it's a conversation to have with your employees. You can generally ask them to actually have some annual leave.
Perfect. As they wanted these forms done by the 30th of April, although that may have been extended now at the latest, what happens if we're bringing back staff who are stood down after this date? So
the hardest thing with this is if you re-employ a stood down employee, they still need to meet the eligibility criteria at the 1st of March. So tick for that if you can, but you also need to make sure you meet the JobKeeper minimum wage condition. So of $1,500 a fortnight. So you're going to have to pay them $3,000. Now, if you've stood them down, or in some instances, people have retrenched or just let go people and they've gone on to JobSeeker, there can be repercussions for the employee from that as well.
Okay, perfect. In relation to casuals, the eligibility of casual employees, is there a clear definition of what regular and systematic means?
Yeah, so there's a little bit of assistance with this. So it refers to the likelihood of the casual having a recurring work schedule or a reasonable expectation of ongoing work. There's no minimum hours specified in the legislation at all or the rules. So if I worked in a fish and chip shop on a Saturday for 8 hours, if I have been doing that for the last 12 months, I've been employed there for 12 months and I've been doing 1 day regularly on the weekend for the whole of this time, I should be eligible for JobKeeper as a long-term and casual.
Perfect. Moving on to payments. What do you do with staff that are on part-time hours and their wages are less than $1,500 per fortnight?
Yeah, so basically we need to do what we talked about before. We need to make sure that we increase their wage to that $1,500 a fortnight. So it's a top up. Excuse me while my light turns off. So you'll need to increase it up to that $1,500 per fortnight because this is the amount that you're going to get back from the ATO. Yeah, so basically increase it up to the $1,500 as a JobKeeper supplement, if you like.
Perfect. Okay, moving on to self-employed. My company will commence this financial year. Previously, I was a sole trader. Am I entitled to JobKeeper?
So with that question, I assumed that person was not taking a wage from the company. Because if you were an employee of the company, you just have to satisfy that test on the 1st of March. So if you weren't, it doesn't matter that, well, the commenced this financial year is an issue for the drop in turnover. So that's the test that we'll probably have to have an alternate test, but still have a look at, did we have an ABN on the 12th of March? Did we have supplies to the ATO? If you're not an employee, were you actively engaged in the business? You weren't, and if you're not entitled to a JobKeeper payment from another business or employer, and you're not a permanent employee of another employer. So yeah, you should be able to, but we need to wait for those alternate tests because you haven't been in business for 12 months.
Okay, perfect. At the director, if the business qualifies for JobKeeper, should I then be enrolled to be an employee of the company?
Not necessary, and probably not something we would suggest, because it's difficult to, you don't have to, and I don't believe it's recommended that you do. You still will have the ability to get that participant, the business participation amount, which is the $1,500. But the other thing is that you're not an employee at the 1st of March necessarily. Yep. So I'd be very nervous about going back to the ATO to say that you were an employee back on the 1st of March when there's no records to substantiate that. So I'd be going for a JobKeeper payment as an active, the business participant model.
Okay, moving on to administration. So once you've received the payments, how do we code in Miable Zero?
Yeah, now as of today, I believe there's some Zero new payroll categories in there. So both of these software people, and I think, Nathan, you actually sent around some information about Zero at some stage. So I think there's some short-term solutions around, but I think most of our major software providers are actually going to be giving us much more with this going forward. And, you know, we do the best that we can at this point in time, and then we'll make sure everything works out perfectly well as soon as we can, basically.
And then moving on from that, do we need to add something to, like, we're obviously communicating with staff, do we need to add anything to the pay slip stating JobKeeper?
That's my recommendation, that we actually show that, because JobKeeper, as you would know, doesn't have super on it if it's a top-up. So a different payroll category or an allowance, which is I think how Xero's handling it, should not have super on it. So I'd actually be showing employees that they are actually getting JobKeeper.
Perfect. Okay. What does it mean for super and workers' comp insurance?
Now, I don't know what it's like in NT, but every other state for workers' comp is silent at the moment. They haven't said anything, but certainly super is not payable on if it's a top-up, or if I've been stood down, it's not payable on the 1,500. Yeah. So,
and I'll check up the workers' comp. I'll speak to a few people about the workers' comp and see if we've got anything on that.
Yeah. Look, and most of the states just haven't done anything with it yet, but I think workers' comp are just sitting on their hands at the moment, to be honest. So, you guys don't have payroll tax in Northern Territory, do you? Well, it's fairly high, isn't it?
Yeah, 1.5. So it's 1.5 million. It's quite high. So
yeah. Have you've got a deferral or a waive as well, haven't you?
We do. Yeah, we've got a deferral and a waiver. Tax, we've talked about. Tax is the same, so it's no different in withholding.
Yeah, that's right.
Perfect. If a casual employee has a second permanent part-time job, is there any exceptions to claim JobKeeper from the casual employee? The same money.
This is a tricky question, because under the legislation, JobKeeper, you can if you employ casual in one and full-time or part-time in another, you actually have to go to your full-time and part-time role to actually get JobKeeper. You can't get it from your casual one. So essentially, if a part-time employee, if their employer doesn't get that, it doesn't become eligible, they can't get JobKeeper. So this is a bit of a nasty one, to be honest.
Yeah, okay. What's preventing us from selecting eligible employees?
One in, all in, unfortunately. So you can't get past that. You can't cherry pick on those unless you've retrenched people and you're not bringing them back.
Yeah. And just one other thing with casuals, what if they refuse to work after they're signing on for the JobKeeper? And, you know, what if their performance is below below par. Can we terminate them or do we have to keep them on?
Look, that once again, that's a fair work question, and Nathan and I aren't fair work lawyers. I would have thought that HR, like employment conditions, are exactly the same. So now, Nathan, we've not got a lot of time, but we could probably go through some of these live questions.
Yeah, all right, I'll go through them. I've got them. So, firstly, if we're a director of a company and we're also an employee, which one's better to apply for the JobKeeper?
In actual fact, I think if that's the instance, well, the one in all in will work to start with. So if it's an eligible business, you will do it as an employee, not as a director. Yeah. And in actual fact, that is the preferred method, that you go as an employee rather than a business participant.
Perfect. All right. If my business is not eligible for March, but estimates for April looks to be down, do I pay the JobKeeper for April or just for May?
So you'd pay it for April. So yeah, definitely you'd be starting to do it for April.
Perfect. My employees are casuals and paid on an hourly basis. With work having dropped off recently, I've been paying them less for the last couple of weeks. I won't have paid them $3,000 for the month. So what happens then?
So that's, unfortunately, we actually have to pay them $1,500 a fortnight. So that's a funding question, and that's something probably to talk to you with your bank.
Yeah. So, you know, we'd have to top up. We'd have to do an extra pay run.
Yeah, by the 30th of April. Yeah.
So if we've been fortunate enough to employ more people this year than last year, does that, you know, and obviously that's based on turnover, does that mean that we can do some alternate tests?
Look, I'm hoping we will, because I think we should be able to, but until we actually see those, we're not going to know.
Okay. Can you see any situation where an employee might be better off not entering into JobKeeper?
If they've shut down completely and they don't like their prospects of going back to it and they don't want this responsibility to do it.
Yeah.
So, Nathan, we may get cut off. Actually, we've got a little bit more. So keep going.
I'll go over to another one because they're on two different ones. So if an employee who is eligible actually stopped work and the last pay period was on the 3rd of March, would they still be eligible?
So if they were employed on the 1st of March, yes, they would still be eligible.
So being paid on the 3rd, they would be. And as this is the same, if we use April, our month, as our month impact month and not March, does a monthly reporting required reassessment as of the 30% ongoing, or once we're in, we're in?
Once we're in, we're in.
Yeah. If we are paying weekly and we have employees that have been stood down for 3 weeks and re-employed, do we have to backdate the JobKeeper to the beginning of April?
Yes, yes, we do. If we're going to claim JobKeeper for them for the whole year, for the whole month of April, and which we will have to do, yes, we do have to. Perfect.
Can we still keep paying our employees weekly?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. As long as you've got 2 payments in your fortnight and it adds up to $1,500, perfect.
We've got a long-term employee who misses out on the 12-month buffer of 5 days. Can we request a special exemption?
Oh, that's nasty, isn't it? I'm sorry, but that is nasty. Oh, man. Is that from the day they physically started or from the day they actually, oh, look, that's a nasty one. I think, I don't know, practically, I'd be slamming that one through. Yeah. So, technically, no.
Maybe we'll take that one offline for the person that's...
Yeah, technically, no.
Do we have to nominate all eligible employees or can we choose to nominate one who is still working?
No, well, if they're all still with you and they're not been dismissed, you actually will have to include all eligible employees.
If they're a casual and they've been terminated...
You don't have to bring them back.
Yeah,
they've got the right to ring you and say, are you eligible for JobKeeper and will you put me on it?
Yeah. Will they, if they were stood down, they have to come back if we're a one in all in, but if they're actually terminated, a different story.
Yeah.
This quarter is not quite a quarter for my industry, so we may not have dropped the full 30% in this period. However, we took a large liability in January because of work we expected to be doing. Now that work is obviously on hold, but I still have increased liabilities. Will the Commissioner take these into consideration?
Only if they can build that into an alternate test, and I actually don't know that that's something that they will actually consider. So I think as it stands at the basic test, that they won't take that into account. But yeah, okay.
Perfect. What happens if we back pay by the end of the month, but then not eligible?
If you're not eligible or the employee's not eligible, somebody's going to have to pay it back, basically.
Okay. Can we get that money from the staff member?
Well, that's the issue, and that's a fair work question too. This is why we want to be absolutely certain that we're eligible as an employer first before we go to our staff.
Yeah. I've got an employee that's a long-term casual and affected by COVID-19. He has another part-time employment. His income split is 50-50 between the two. Can he stand down the employee and rehire him as a part-time employee and then claim the JobKeeper for him?
Well, if he's a long-term casual, he should be able to get the JobKeeper for him anyway.
He's part-time in his other job, even so they're
Oh, I see. Of course. Yes. No, technically not. Sorry, they have to go to the part-time employment.
Yeah.
Which that's a hard one, isn't it? It's a really hard one.
Yeah, we'll take that one offline as well.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got only a couple of minutes left. Are we allowed to terminate staff that have been stood down?
That's a fair work question, which you'll have to talk to a lawyer about that one, unfortunately.
Yeah. No employees, one director only, no permanent wages, only drawings. How should we enrol as a director?
Yeah, so that'll be a business participant notice to get one lot of JobKeeper through.
Yeah. As a not-for-profit business, we're not financially able to pay the month of April for eligible employees. If we terminate employees, can we reinstate them later?
Look, I think that's actually a possibility when you become eligible. I might chase that one up a little bit further, Nathan, because I think that's a really good question. Yeah, you still have to meet that eligible employers.
Okay, perfect. We've got about a minute left. My pay cycle is 4 weeks, and even if I change it to fortnight, I will only have paid $750 to back pay from previous cycle, then $1,500 for this cycle, being the 26th of April. Is this okay?
So you have to look at your JobKeeper fortnights, and so for this 4-week period, you have to pay $3,000. So you might need to pay another $750.
Cool, perfect. And then that question before about the 12 months and 5 days short, it's physically started. So I think we'll take that one offline.
I think we will too. We better ramp it up, finish it off.
We're all up. So hopefully that's answered some questions. Do we have time for one more?
Yeah.
How do we how do we pay the active business participation? Is there a specific way this needs to be recorded in my
So you're not actually paying them. You don't have to pay them, but you will receive money from the ATO, and it's going to go in as other income, which will be assessable.
Perfect. And the last one, 17-year-old high school student who works on weekends or during school holidays, current employee, she only earns $100 a week normally. Will she get the JobKeeper?
Technically, yes, if she's long-term. And that's the people that are going to get a lot out of this.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's difficult if she's long-term. So... Okay, we better sign off there, Nathan.
All right, well, hopefully everyone got everything out of it. And if there's any other questions, feel free to hit me up and we will we'll speak soon. Thank you for attending.
Okay, excellent. Thanks, Nathan.
Bye.